I discovered superglue in my husband's car where lubricant should be. Then I found the hotel receipts, the secret emails. And then I heard them planning to steal my bakery. My daughter-in-law and my husband together. So I replaced his lubricant with industrial superglue. And when the smoke billowed from my kitchen window, my firefighter son kicked down the door to find his father and his wife, stuck together, naked, in front of the entire neighborhood. But let me start from the beginning. The kitchen table. The silence, thick as fog. That clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my late mother, ticked with accusatory rhythm. Each beat a reminder of the life I was beginning to suspect was a lie. Julian had just returned from another business dinner. He looked haunted, exhausted, his face a map of fatigue and guilt. Lines etched around his eyes that had never been there before. He tossed his jacket on the sofa, loosened his tie like a noose, and collapsed onto the bed without showering. That's when I smelt it, a sweet floral perfume, not mine. The scent hung in the air like a confession. Minutes later, his snoring filled the house. That sound used to bring me comfort. Now it felt like mockery. I got up and began tidying the living room. His jacket, his wallet, his phone. The screen was still on, a new email glowing. Julian never used email. He always said, "Juliet, all this tech stuff is too complicated. I'd rather just make a call." But now, an email. I opened it. "You were incredible tonight, Dad," followed by a red heart. I froze. Dad? Who was calling him that? And in such an intimate tone? I swiped down, trembling. Just a strange email address. No answers. Only questions. A shiver ran through me. Not from cold, but from bone-deep fear. I glanced at the bedroom. Julian turned over with a sputtering snore, his face peaceful. The contrast to the storm raging inside me was infuriating. My heart pounded like a thief's. I gathered his dirty clothes for the laundry. In his pant pocket, a folded receipt. From a fancy steakhouse in San Antonio, dated that very night. San Antonio? He told me he was meeting partners in Dallas. The receipt showed a party of 2. A bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, the same wine he'd bought me for our 10th anniversary. Filet and pasta. I tried to remember the last time Julian took me to a place like that. Maybe 10 years ago when I opened my first bakery. The flickering candlelight. His proud smile. Now that memory was a lie. I photographed the receipt and the email, my hands trembling with anger and existential dread. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to witness the collapse of my entire life. I went to the garage. Julian's old SUV was still warm, the air thick with gasoline and that faint, sweet perfume. I opened the door, turned on my flashlight, checked every corner. Nothing unusual, just loose change and an empty water bottle. But in the passenger side glove box, my fingers brushed against something plastic. I pulled it out. My heart almost stopped. A tube of personal lubricant. Used. Dried residue on the cap. Julian and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always said he was tired, that age had sapped his desire. So what was this for? I stood in the dark garage, staring at it like it was a grenade. I put it back exactly where I'd found it. Wiped my hands raw with a napkin, as if the betrayal would leave a permanent mark. Under the back seat, crumpled napkins soaked in that sweet floral perfume. Not mine. I photographed everything. That night, I barely slept. The images wouldn't stop swirling. The lubricant, the receipt, that email. The next morning, Julian came down looking tired. Sat at the table, grabbed his coffee. "I have an important meeting today," he said without looking at me. "I'm sure I'll be home late." He was so good at this, the easy lies, the casual tone. I nodded with a strained smile. "All right, be careful." He patted my shoulder and left. I couldn't just sit there inventing theories. I needed the truth. I called Mrs. Miller, an old friend who'd once mentioned a discreet private investigator. An hour later, I received a message from Thomas. "Mrs. Roberts, please don't worry. I will help you." At noon, I met him at a small downtown cafe. I handed him a flash drive with the photos, the email, the receipt, the lubricant, the napkins. "I think my husband is cheating on me," I said. The words tasted like ash. Thomas nodded, reviewing each image. "I'll start following Mr. Roberts this afternoon. Don't do anything to arouse suspicion." That night at the bakery, my phone vibrated. A message from Thomas. A photo of Julian in his light blue shirt, entering a fancy restaurant, holding hands with a woman. I zoomed in. My heart stopped. It was Allison, my daughter-in-law. She wore a tight black dress, heavy makeup, intense red lipstick. They didn't look like father-in-law and daughter-in-law. They looked like lovers. I sank into my chair, trembling. Allison, how was this possible? At family gatherings, she and Julian always acted distant, barely speaking. Now I realized it was all an act. More photos arrived. Then sitting in a candlelit corner, Allison leaning toward him, smiling. Julian toasting her glass with a tender gaze. In 40 years, I had never seen him look at me like that. At 2 a.m, a video arrived. I put on headphones and pressed play. Allison leaned close to Julian's ear, whispering something that made him laugh. Her voice sweet, her eyes sparkling. Then they got up and left. Julian opened the car door for her like she was royalty. I replayed it again and again, each time another stab to the heart. Allison, the woman I'd treated like a daughter, whom I'd taught to make our family's traditional flan. And Julian, the man I'd given my whole life to. What were they doing behind Daniel's back? Behind mine? Days later, more photos arrived. Julian and Allison leaving a law office together, walking close, too close. Then a video from a hotel balcony, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, hair moving softly in the wind. Then they kissed, brief, but devastating. I replayed it frame by frame, each image digging deeper into my soul. Thomas wrote, "They rented the room for the afternoon. Looks like they're staying the night." Julian had texted me earlier, "Juliet, I won't be home tonight. Meeting a potential partner from out of town." Out of town, he was here, in a 4-star hotel, with our daughter-in-law. I saved everything to a hard drive. Each photo, each video. I remembered family gatherings. Everyone around the table. Allison always sat far from Julian, sometimes looked at him with disgust. Daniel would joke, "Mom, I think Allison can't stand Dad." It had all been a performance. Then came the phone call from Thomas, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Mrs. Roberts, I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. Special equipment. They didn't notice. I'm sending it now." An audio file appeared. I put on headphones and pressed play. Allison's voice, cold, ambitious. "Dad, hurry up with that fake contract. I want that whole chain of stores already. I want that old hag out of the house." Then Julian, "Don't worry. Juliet doesn't know anything. Leave it in my hands. She trusts me too much." A knife twisting in my heart. They weren't just cheating on me. They were planning to steal everything I'd built. The bakery chain. All the sweat and tears. The sleepless nights. Every batch I'd baked. Every delivery I'd run across town. It was all mine. Julian never once got his hands dirty in the kitchen. And now he and Allison wanted to take it all. To kick me out of the house I'd made a home. I copied the audio to the flash drive. Wrote down the time and place. More photos arrived. Julian and Allison in his car with thick stacks of papers. Allison marking documents with a red pen. Julian nodding and smiling. Thomas wrote, "Overheard something. They want to use a contact at the notary's office to make the transfer." That night at dinner, I sat across from Julian under yellow light that gave his face a strange glow. He ate and spoke in monotone, as if nothing were wrong. "Juliet, I have to sign some important business papers this week. Maybe you should look them over." In my head, I heard Allison's voice from the recording. "Dad, hurry up and sign the fake contracts." I gave him a dry smile. "Yes, I'll look at them later. I'm tired now." He nodded, took a sip of wine, as if nothing were wrong. But I knew. Behind that smile was a predator waiting to strike. Julian had a few more glasses. His face turned red. He started slurring about a difficult client. When he got up, staggering, and went to the bedroom, I cleared the table, containing the rage boiling inside me. He threw himself on the bed, snoring loudly, left his car keys on the nightstand. Gleaming under the dim light, I stared at them, my heart pounding. This was my chance. I entered the bedroom slowly, grabbed the keys, went straight to the garage. The night was quiet. All I could hear were crickets. I opened the car door. That smell, gasoline mixed with sweet perfume. I opened the glove compartment. There it was, the tube of lubricant with a loose cap, dried residue on the edge. I took it to the kitchen, washed my hands with lemon soap, scrubbed thoroughly, as if to erase every trace of betrayal. I opened the tool drawer, took out a tube of clear industrial superglue, the same kind I'd used to fix a chair at the bakery. A tool of my trade, now a weapon of revenge. I carefully unscrewed the cap of the lubricant and filled it with glue, drop by drop, until it was completely full. Wiped the nozzle, shook it gently, tested it. It came out smoothly, just like the original. At a glance, no one would notice. I smiled faintly. This wasn't a game. This was justice. I put the tube back in the glove compartment, adjusted everything exactly as it was. Back in the house, I put the keys back, grabbed a book and sat on the sofa. The dim light fell on the pages, but I couldn't read a word. I thought of Daniel, my son, who believed he was living happily with Allison. How could I tell him his wife and his father were betraying us? I thought of the bakery chain, 40 years of work and sleepless nights. Julian never understood it, but I trusted he supported me. Now I knew he was just waiting for the right moment to take everything. The next day, I told Julian at breakfast, I have to travel to Nashville tomorrow to sign a contract. I'll be home late. Can you take care of dinner? I watched him. He looked up surprised, but in his eyes something shone, relief. A big contract, he asked, taking my hand with feigned tenderness. Don't worry, go ahead. That spark in his eyes, that slight curve of his lips. He wanted me to leave. Before I left the next morning, I set up a smoke trap, a thin string tied to the stove's igniter, connected to the window. All I had to do was pull it remotely. I tied Daniel's old recorder behind the bedroom bookshelf, hidden behind a family photo frame. Continuous recording. I shook Julian awake. I have to go to the bus station. I'll probably be back late tonight. He mumbled, all right, be careful. Then buried his face in his pillow. Instead of going to the station, I went to Mrs. Peterson's house across the street. She gave me a chair by the window. From there, I could see everything. Around 10, a taxi pulled up. Allison got out. Light floral dress, dark sunglasses. Julian opened the door, looked around quickly, ushered her inside. I turned on the app connected to the hidden recorder. Allison's laughter came through my headphones, clinking glasses, heavy footsteps. Then Julian's voice. We don't have to hide in a hotel anymore. Allison laughed. You really know how to pick your moments. The old hag is gone, right? I bit my lip, holding back rage. Then the bed started to creak. Other sounds I didn't want to hear. A few minutes later, suddenly, Allison screamed. What the hell is this? We're stuck. Panic in her voice. Almost sobbing. Julian growled. Shut up. Wait, let me see. I smiled. I activated the smoke trap remotely. The string pulled. The stove ignited. The skillet of oil caught fire. Black smoke billowed out of the kitchen window in fixed spirals. Mrs. Peterson gasped. Juliet, your house is on fire. Neighbors came running outside, shouting, Call the firefighters. In my headphones, Allison's voice grew more desperate. Julian, do something. I can't move. Julian roared. Don't scream. I'm trying. But they couldn't do anything. The industrial superglue was already at work, leaving them trapped at their most humiliating moment. 10 minutes later, the fire truck siren screamed down the street. The red vehicle skidded to a stop. Daniel jumped out. Fire chief uniform, face tense. Get the equipment ready. There might be people inside. I watched my son, felt a sharp pain. He was about to face the cruelest truth. Daniel led with a sledgehammer, breaking down the front door. His team followed with hoses and extinguishers. From the bedroom, Julian's desperate shouts mixed with Allison's sobs. Do something, Julian. I can't move. Daniel entered the bedroom. Through my headphones, I heard his voice falter. What? What is this? A firefighter behind him murmured, Oh my God. Another couldn't hold back a nervous laugh. Daniel shouted, "Silence," but it was too late. A firefighter ran out. "Chief, the smoke is under control. Just a small oil fire, nothing serious." But Daniel didn't reply. Neighbors crowded at the door, pointing, whispering, "What's happening?" "It's Julian and his daughter-in-law." "Oh my God, how could this have happened?" Mrs. Peterson took out her phone, started recording. She looked at me with eyes full of pity and anger. "Juliet, you knew about this, didn't you?" I nodded softly. Daniel came out of the bedroom. Through the headset, I heard Julian shout, "Get everyone out of here. Close the door, Daniel." But it was too late. The whole neighborhood had gathered. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law caught in the act. Unbelievable. Poor Juliet. The firefighters wrapped sheets around Julian and Allison, carried them out on stretchers. Allison's broken sobs mixed with groans of pain. "Please do something. I can't stand it anymore." Julian mumbled weakly, "Don't let anyone see us." But everyone had already seen. Looks of revulsion, mocking laughs, disappointed heads shaking. What a disgrace. How filthy. The ambulance left with its siren blaring. I stood among the people, pretending to be surprised, as if I'd just run from the bus station. Daniel stood motionless in the yard, arms hanging, face pale as a ghost. His teammates avoided looking at him. Hours later at the hospital, a doctor came out, sweat on his forehead. "Mrs. Roberts, we managed to separate them. No serious damage, just need some skin ointment." I nodded. "Can I see them?" The nurse gave me 2 tubes of ointment. The moment she turned around, I swapped them for the mustard I'd prepared. My hands moved quickly, confidently. I entered the hospital room. "Julian, Allison, are you okay?" Allison was in bed, hair a mess, eyes red, unable to look at me. Julian mumbled, "Juliet, I can explain." I placed the tubes on the table and left. Minutes later, gut-wrenching screams came from the room. "It burns. My skin is on fire. What the hell is this? Who did this?" The entire hallway erupted. An old woman whispered to her son, "It's them, the couple from the video this morning. The father-in-law with the daughter-in-law. What a disgrace." Another added, "They deserve it." Mrs. Peterson's video had spread throughout the neighborhood in social media. When the crowd dispersed, Daniel entered with a thick folder. I had called him, asked him to get the envelope with evidence and the divorce papers I'd prepared. He handed me the folder, his gaze empty. I opened it, took out the documents, placed them on the table in front of Julian and Allison. I looked Julian directly in the eyes, my voice cold but firm. 40 years of marriage end here. Sign these, then disappear from my son's life and mine." Allison collapsed, crying, looking at Daniel. "Honey, forgive me, please." But Daniel just looked at her, his gaze hard as stone, and left without saying a word. Julian tried to grab my hand, voice trembling. "Juliet, listen to me." I pulled away. "Don't say anything else. You chose this path," he yelled desperately. "Juliet, please." But the nurse came in. "Be quiet. This is a hospital." I turned and walked away without looking back. In the hallway, Daniel leaned against the wall, head in his hands. I walked over, put my hand on his shoulder. "Mom," he whispered, voice broken. "Why did it have to be Dad? Why her?" I didn't answer, just hugged him tightly. In that moment, I knew Julian and Allison had lost everything. Their honor, their marriage, their dirty plan. But Daniel and I had also lost a family. Weeks later, my bakery was busier than ever. "Juliet, you are so strong," Mrs. Peterson said, holding a bag of fresh flan. "The whole neighborhood is proud of you." I smiled and thanked her, but only I knew that strength came from the broken pieces of my heart. Daniel moved in with me. He didn't talk much about what happened, but I noticed the change. His eyes looked deep, carrying a wound that wouldn't heal. "Mom, I want to stay here for a while," he told me the first night. "I'm going to help you run the bakery." I hugged him, nodded without asking anything. Every morning we opened the bakery together. I prepared the oven. Daniel reviewed invoices and called clients. "Mom, the Grand Hotel wants to increase their sweet pastry order." "All right, I'll prepare more dough." These simple moments gave me peace I hadn't felt in years. No more fake looks from Julian. No more calculating voice from Allison. Just Daniel and me, taking care of what we still had. Dinners were just the two of us now. Simple meals. Sometimes rice with beans and chicken. Sometimes just bread with coffee. "Mom, can you make me some flan this weekend?" he asked one night, with a faint smile. The first I'd seen since the scandal. "All right," I replied, relieved. "But you have to help me stir the caramel." He nodded. In that moment, I felt we were slowly recovering. I started making time for myself. Joined a cooking club at the community center. Started going to church on weekends. Sometimes I'd walk with Mrs. Peterson in the town square. "Everyone is still talking about Julian and Allison," she'd say. "But they say you're the one who won." I just smiled. I won, maybe, but the price was losing my whole family. Daniel also started to change, became less quiet, began telling me about his work as a firefighter. "Please be careful," I said one night, voice trembling. "You're all I have left." Daniel looked at me with tenderness. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll never leave you alone." Those words were medicine. They gave me back faith. Even though I'd lost so much, I still had my son. One afternoon, while the bakery was full of customers, I sat at the cash register, watching the street. The bell rang nonstop. The smell of sweet bread filled the air. I looked at the trays of flan and pastries and thought about the entire journey. I'd built this bakery with my own hands, from a girl in San Diego to a woman who knew how to endure. Julian and Allison wanted to take everything from me, but they failed. I kept my bakery. I kept Daniel. And most importantly, I kept myself. What would you do if your own family tried to steal everything from you? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from.